Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, co-editor-in-chief of Retail Insider. Joining me today is Bruce Winder, a retail analyst and expert. Thanks, Bruce, for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Mario.
Okay, let's talk about 2025. Biggest news, obviously, was the shutdown of the Hudson's Bay company. And tell me how you would describe 2025 for the retail sector.
Yeah, 2025 was a fairly tough year overall for retail because you had the black cloud of the trade issues with the US that was a bit of an overhang. That sent a bit of a shockwave through companies. Companies were nervous about hiring. Consumers were nervous about spending. There was some inflation because of that. So a lot of uncertainty, mostly from a geopolitical trade perspective, and that sort of cascaded down to 2025. Now, not across all categories. The value segment did pretty well. If you look at people like No Frills, Maxis, some of the value segments, Dollarama did pretty well. I think Amazon, some of those folks, Walmart probably had a decent year. And some of the luxury players had a decent year as well. But again, that sort of middle retail is really having a hard time. A lot of consumers channel down to try to save money. The restaurant sector was tough as well because a lot of people stayed home to eat. So that's the kind of year it was. I mean, there was some good things too, some interesting things. AI really became more mainstream, especially in the fall, through ChatGPT and Perplexity and Rufus if you're on Amazon. A lot of folks use ChatGPT for discovery. That was a fairly big trend as well. Buy now, pay later got bigger
Mhm.
in the fall. We also had theft, retail theft continue.
Yeah.
So we all saw the videos on social media, whether it's the LCBO or other retailers where thieves became more brazen. Buy Canadian was big as a result of the trade issue. That was a major theme as well, where Canadians were looking to try to buy from Canadian companies through or Canadian-made products where possible, based on your budget. Same day delivery toward the end of the year was really big. So folks like Amazon started offering four different delivery windows in Toronto and Ottawa and Hamilton. So we're starting to see almost instantaneous delivery. And for those who don't offer that, a lot of retailers partnered with Uber Eats and Skip and sort of offering that almost real-time delivery. So that was a big
Yeah.
trend as well. Lululemon CEO leaving was big toward the end, sort of the state of Lululemon that sent shockwaves through the industry as well. So those are oh, and Canadian Tire, of course, had their $2 billion restructuring True North strategy. So
Yeah.
lots of little stories happening for 2025.
Let's talk a little bit about the Bay.
Yeah.
Obviously left behind tons of retail space out there, both in malls and in the standalone side of things, right? Where some of the Bay stores are located in downtowns, major cities across Canada. Um, what do you think is going to happen to all that space?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's going to vary a lot by property. It's going to be very property specific. Some of the properties in marquee malls are going to do okay. They're going to be filled. And there's good opportunities there. Some of the properties in sort of secondary or tertiary malls might be a real tough sell to
Yeah.
try to fill that space. As we see some malls struggle. Downtown is a bit of a wild card. There's a lot of downtowns. And it's a bit of a wild card because in some cases, downtowns could strengthen because more workers are coming back to the office 5 days a week. But there's also a lot of crime downtown in a lot of Canada's downtown, and that's scared off shoppers. So, and then who's going to take the space, right? Is it going to be a national champion like a Canadian Tire or a Loblaw, or is it going to be an international retailer, who might take the space, who wants, a little bit of an exposure to Canada? Or do you start to look at unconventional tenants like car dealerships and, gyms and doctors' offices? So it's going to be quite interesting to see how this all plays out.
Are we going to see another Hudson's Bay in 2026? Like
I don't think
in
so.
terms of another, I meant another closure of a massive
Oh.
scale.
I think we are going to see some closures. I'm not sure we'll see a massive closure like we did this year. I think that was once in a generation, but I think we will see a number of smaller or weaker retailers bow out. I know the restaurant industry. I know Sylvain Charlebois wrote an article this week about how he
Yeah,
anticipates about 4,000 restaurants will close this year. So I think you're going to see quite a few small retailers close because it's just so hard to do business now. We might have a couple of surprises in terms of closures. The big one is obviously in the U.S. Everyone's looking at Saks Global and
yeah.
what's going to happen there. But yeah, I mean, it happens now and then. Part of it is the natural circle of life with retail, but part of it is also we're in very tough times right now.
Speaking of which, how do retailers respond these days to the pressures, I guess, and in pretty strong pressures for the consumer out there?
It's tough. I mean, part of it is sort of luck of the draw. What's your value proposition? Which customer are you serving? If you're serving the affluent customer, you're probably in pretty good shape. They have a lot of disposable income. There's good spending there. If you're serving middle retail, you're in trouble. If you're serving the value customer, you've probably got good opportunities there. But whatever you're doing, make sure you know your customer better than your competitors. Make sure you're utilizing data as everyone is, AI where it makes sense, but just
Yeah.
have a great value proposition. And I would say don't forget about customer service. A lot of retailers drop the ball on customer service. They have a great sort of front end of their interface, but when it comes to a bump in the road or a problem, they don't treat their customers well. So don't forget about that. It costs a bit more money, but it's so crucial.
Yeah. Speaking of which, what about the labor situation out there for retailers? How is that heading into 2026?
Yeah, it's interesting. And there's a couple of dynamics in play. One is we've seen more labor unrest over the last few years because we had inflation during the pandemic. So you might continue to see that. But the other thing, too, is that there could be a bit of a labor, I don't want to say shortage, but a change in labor. I mean, the government has proactively cut back on the temporary foreign worker program.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see our population start to slow and decline, actually, based on immigration reform. So, depending on who you are and where you're at, you might see just a change up in labor dynamics over the next little while. It's become a political hot potato too. So we'll have to see how that works out. But, over time, I don't want to say there's a labor shortage, but there could be labor sort of differences in inputs and outputs depending on the region.
Okay. When you look at 2026, what key trends should we be on the watch for that perhaps emerged or solidified in 2025?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion, and I know it's overused, but they talk about the K-shaped economy, right? That's everywhere now, and that's where, like I mentioned earlier, if you're affluent, you're spending a lot, you're spending well. You've got money in the stock market, money in real estate. You're
Yeah.
you're at the top of the food chain from a career standpoint. And then you've got everyone else. And I think that's going to continue to polarize retail. That's a major trend that I think is going to continue. Convenience is another major trend I talked about, whether it's same day delivery or, whether you're Amazon or whether you're using some of the food apps we said. Convenience is going to improve. That's a major trend. Tariff concerns is obviously going to continue. We don't know what's going to happen. Is President Trump going to get overruled by the Supreme Court on his tariffs? But even if they do, he might still do them. So, how's that going to shake out? Negotiating in our land, CUSMA, Canada, U.S., Mexico agreement. What's going to happen there? Is that deferred another year? Is there going to be some negotiation there? AI is going to have continued influence. Right now, it's more about discovery and search and comparison. In the future, it might be about purchase too. In the US, some retailers are using AI to actually allow you to purchase products on the platform on ChatGPT. Population decline, like mentioned, that could have negative impact on certain categories in retail, particularly food and fast fashion. And like we talked about earlier, just the gap of anchor tenants in malls because of the gap from the Bay leaving and before that Nordstrom and Saks. And before that, Target and Sears. There's just a lot of empty boxes in malls. How is that going to play out? Are they going to be filled? What's going to happen there? Those are some of the major trends I identified for 26.
All right. Lots happening. Thanks, Bruce, for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. Have a great day.
You too. That was Bruce Winder, a retail expert and analyst. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, co-editor in chief of Retail Insider. Thanks for joining us today.